It's a drawing show. It's a drawing show.
Welcome back to the drawing show, everyone. My name is Ben Kent, and today we're going to do some drawing. We're going to continue on with this portrait, with this 3/4 view portrait, and we're going to do some shading on this guy. Now, a couple things with this video before we get too far into it. I lost my audio for the background, so you won't hear the little scritchy scratchy of the pencil, which is too bad. And we don't go super far in the process of shading him today, which is okay because there's plenty of things that I want to talk about that hopefully will help you. I think they might, depending on your skill level and where you're at in your drawing. But let's get started. So what I'm doing here is I'm just toning out the entire thing, the entire face. I'll get to the hair in a minute too. You can even tone those out at the same time. I'm not really sure why I did it differently, but that's okay. So we want just like one even tone, more of your lighter tone. And then here we're taking a chamois, just like a little cloth that we can go over all of that, all of those marks and kind of blend everything. We want to go pretty light with this, just enough to blend in those lines that we just put down. Not so crazy though that we lose all of the information that we've already drawn onto the face, but know that it will lighten up all of those lines a little bit. So, but don't worry, we'll be going back in and darkening the areas that we need to darken, and also lightening the areas that we need to lighten with our eraser. So now we're going in and we're toning out the hair. So one of the reasons why I really like doing this, and I feel like it's a very helpful by just throwing down one full solid tone, it makes it a lot easier to go darker in areas. I, for the longest time, didn't even shade my drawings because I was scared of ruining them. Because anytime I would throw down shading, it just looked awful. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I was doing that was because rather than thinking of shapes of shading on the face and actually blocking in everything ahead of time, I would just start shading in areas that didn't need it. And when you're not doing it in blocked in shapes and you're not being strategic about where you're shading, it can come out looking pretty weird. So it's really helpful ahead of time, which is kind of what I'm doing now. I am throwing down some actual shading, but on top of your toned portrait, or even before you start toning, is to actually, now see I'm doing it here, drawing in where the shading is actually going to go and getting your basic shapes in. And it's good to be accurate, and you want to be pretty close, but really this is a point in the portrait process where you can make your own decisions. It's funny to say, but you can make your own decisions. With any drawing, you have the artistic license that if there's some information on a face that just looks, it's going to compete for the focus. And maybe it looks even like a little weird. And you know when you start drawing and you get really detailed with that, it's going to look funny. It's going to draw the eye, and it's not going to look right. You don't have to put that information in there. You can also make decisions where your shadows are way darker than what your reference is showing. You can make it so that there's whole areas of information that are just totally washed out, depending on how that works for your composition and if that looks good or not. I mean, sometimes all you really want the focal point to be is that face, or maybe it's just the eyes. And everything else is just kind of, you get the impression that all that information is there. I've seen a lot of really, really successful portraits where even most of the face, there's not a whole lot of information there, but they put so much detail and great detail into specific parts of the face that look really nice. Typically it is more of the eyes, and that makes sense. That is where we are drawn to, where we really relate with other people. But putting that aside, just make sure when you're blocking in your shading that you're getting in those shapes. And before you really start shading, like we did yesterday, we're taking a step back. We're looking at everything. We're assessing, is this looking good? And we're adjusting. We're adjusting before we start getting too detailed or we get too dark of values in there. Here I'm showing you how I'm sharpening my pencil. For any of you who might be wondering why I have my pencil the way it is with the lead sticking way out, it's actually, I need to resharpen it, although I can't really because it's down to a nub, which is why I have that extender. Just a little block of sandpaper, rub it on that, and get it nice and sharp. It's easy to do, and you don't have to be putting your pencil into a sharpener every minute or so. And I do like to shade with a nice sharp pencil. For this portrait, for the whole thing so far, I've just been using a 4B, which is good. Soft enough to get some pretty dark values, but you can be light with it too, which is helpful. So you can get a pretty full range of tones. So now I'm starting to shade in this cast shadow under the nose. The nose can be tricky, so again, it's good to plan out, be strategic with your shading. It's good to go for it, but you also want to kind of take a little bit of time, think about it before you really start getting in there. Because the nose is one of those parts that you're shading. I mean, it's the thing that's protruding the most out of the face. So I really do think it's one of those things that you really need to get to bring home that face. Because I mean, you can have all the other elements on the face looking great, beautiful, perfect. But if that nose is kind of off, it really draws the attention of the viewer, and it can turn what otherwise would be a successful drawing into not so much of a successful drawing. So take your time with it. That is, I would say, if we're going to talk about one thing, one lesson from this video, as far as shading goes, take your time. Go slow. Don't rush it. Because as I was saying before, when I was scared to shade my drawings because I knew I was going to mess them up, I finally made a drawing and I think it looks good, but I'm worried I'm going to ruin it by shading. There's a balance. You want to be confident in your shading. You don't want to shade scared, because that's not going to be good. But you do need to take your time. When you're shading, you're putting a little bit on, you're assessing, you're adjusting, and you're getting a little bit darker. You're not just going full tilt, dark as you can get. We're finding our lighter tones, getting to our midtones, and gradually building up onto our darker tones. But we are also able to draw in spaces to block in where we think that the shading is going. And that's a great way to put some information down and be able to step back and take a look at it and assess if that's something if that's where that shading needs to go and if it's going to look good or not. And if we think it doesn't look good, then we just erase the line, try again. But that's the thing. Throughout the process, it's all about assessing. I know I've said that word a lot, but I mean, that's the thing. Before we get to this point, if we haven't done a good job of assessing and adjusting, I mean, there's really no amount of shading that's going to save our drawing. So we need to have good foundations. And that doesn't mean that it's not worth continuing on if you do have a drawing that's not so good at this point. I think it's always good practice to just keep going, get some shading down, further your understanding of structure and lighting and where the shadows fall on a face. Because even if it's not the best drawing, not the best face, you can still practice on it and still go for it. And again, I would, if you're doing this with me and you're having a hard time and your drawing's just not coming out the way that you want it to, you're having a hard time shading, you're having a hard time blending your tones, getting harder lines and softer lines, getting a range of different lines and a range of different types of shading. Shade a sphere. Draw a circle, turn it into a sphere, and shade it with one light source. And do that quite a few times, and it will really, really help. Because basically the head is a sphere. You're basically shading a sphere that has a bunch of lumps and bumps on it. And all of those lumps and bumps are almost kind of like their own little spheres. Like that cheekbone, that's a little sphere right there. The way that the face, the chin, underneath the chin, the way that curves up and down, it's like a sphere. I mean, we start by drawing a circle to get these heads in, so they are their own little spheres. So very beneficial. Practice shading a sphere if you're having trouble. Practice shading it anyway. So the reference had a mustache, which was proving to be a little bit tough. And that top lip can also prove to be a little challenging sometimes. So the way that everything's kind of oriented on a face, with that lighting a little bit more direct at this guy, a little higher up in front of him, the way that that top lip kind of comes out at an angle, overhanging everything else. So that top lip is going to get a little bit more heavily shaded than everything else, or at least than the bottom lip. There will be a cast shadow from the top lip onto the bottom lip. And there is a little bit of tonal difference between the lip and the skin underneath it. But that bottom lip is pointing up. So that will be lighter than the top lip. And it will also be lighter than the portion directly underneath that bottom lip. Because that is recessing back into the face. And you get a darker shadow right there. And then the chin at the bottom is coming out again. So you've got lighter at that front part of the chin, and then you are going to have some shading directly underneath it before you get to totally underneath the chin where it meets the neck. So it'll be light, and then it'll start darkening pretty quickly underneath that portion. So that's all that we're going to cover today. We'll get back at it hopefully tomorrow. And I hope you guys learned a few things, had a good time. I had a good time. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Enjoy the drawing show. I hope you guys enjoy it. Leave a like and subscribe and comment if there's something that you guys really want to cover in drawing. Let's do it. And I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.